Good afternoon, fellow guests. Welcome to today's lecture, Echoes of Humanity, Understanding Human Predicament in Malay Literary Texts. I am Anis Kuratu Aini, a Teman Warisan or Heritage Ambassador appointed by the Malay Heritage Foundation, and I will be your MC for today. We are incredibly excited to have all of you here as we journey through the emotional landscapes, universal values, and complex challenges of life as expressed in Malay literary works from across the Malay world. Today's program is brought to you by the Malay Heritage Centre, MHC, co-presented with the Singapore Writers Festival 2024, supported by the Malay Heritage Foundation and Asian Civilizations Museum, with the support of the National Heritage Board and the Ministry of Community, Culture and Youth. In line with SWF 2024's theme, In Our Nature, our focus today will be on exploring the human experience with three Sahabat Sastra, friends of Malay literature appointed by the Malay Language Council, as told by three seminal Malay and Indonesian authors, each one giving voice to the struggles, aspirations and resilience of individuals in the face of societal challenges. These novels are Ranjau Sepanjang Jalan, Bumi Manusia, and Kota Air Mata. Before we begin the session, please be reminded that all mobile devices should be put on silent mode or turned off as a courtesy to the speakers and your fellow audience members. Videography and flash photography are not allowed. Without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, Muazzah Adawiyah, who will be presenting on Ranjau Sepanjang Jalan, No Harvest But a Thorn by Shahnun Ahmad, a Malaysian writer. This classic Malay novel explores the harsh realities of rural life, chronicling the daily struggles of peasant family in Malaysia. It serves as a poignant reminder of human perseverance and resilience in the face of adversity. Muazzah is currently a final year student at the Singapore University of Social Sciences, pursuing a bachelor's degree in Malay language and literature. Let's welcome Muazzah for her presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Muazzah Roslan, your first presenter for today's session. Before I begin, let's all take a look at the backdrop visual here and use our social imagination. Imagine a world where survival means not just hard work, but battling forces that feels almost cosmic in scale. That's the world Shahnun Ahmad introduces us to in his novel Ranjau Sepanjang Jalan. Okay, so I'll be presenting mostly on the synopsis of the book and three contexts from the book, as well as the relevance of the book to the society. Okay, so firstly, Shahnun Ahmad is one of Malaysia's most esteemed authors. He was born in 1933 in Kedah, which often tackles work on socio-political themes, and known for his contributions in the Malay language. He was awarded with many accolades and also received the prestigious title of Sastrawan Negara in 1982. Okay, now let's delve into Lahuma's world. The story starts from the life of Lahuma and his wife and 7 daughters, who struggled to manage their 14 relung, which is a unit to measure rice fields in Malaysia. And the life of death of the family depends on this rice fields. So to cut it short, unfortunately, Lahuma was accidentally stabbed by a nibong thorn around his tummy area, and he did not want to get treated because of his circumstances that claimed his life. So his wife Jeha now has to shoulder on the responsibility, the great burden of working the rice fields together with their children, but it's still not enough to replace Lahuma's energy. Unable to survive all the hardships after hardships, unfortunately Jeha became mentally unsound and was sent to a mental institution that left her eldest daughter to take, as the successor of the struggle. So essentially this story is about not just about farming, but it's actually about the raw endurance of the human spirit that it was intricately portrayed in the novel. Okay, and it is a narrative that reflects the themes of struggle, loss, survival, and existential dilemma. So for the settings, we have the setting is in Kedah. It's a rice fields, Lahuma's house during the 1960s, and the characters are mainly Lahuma, his wife Jeha, their 7 daughters, and some villagers, Tok Penghulu and his neighbours Ali Ketopi. So if you're familiar with the movie, these are the cast who played the characters. Okay, moving on. The first topic is on exploration of despair. Okay, for this novel, it highlights the significant challenges faced on their reliance to rice fields. And it is not just about reliance, but it's also their core, the core to their livelihood. It's not only sustenance, but it's also represent their struggle and hopes of the agrarian life. When we're talking about elements of nature, for example, floods, pests, inadequate resources, each of these setbacks is actually a reminder of, it shows their vulnerability, that it is a consistent battle. And also it shows their resilience, their ongoing efforts to strive for a better future. Now for the constraints. This novel has highlighted the themes of being powerless against economic forces and their difficulty to escape from the vicious cycle that stifle their growth potential. Okay, because of this struggle, it illustrates the cycle of poverty and the lack of resources to advance in their life, quality of life. Moving on. Okay, moving on. The role of family and faith is a very strong theme that was highlighted here, because it shows that Lahuma's wife and family play a critical role in supporting him as a pillar of strength and an unbreakable pillar that fosters resilience. And also, we can't ignore the fact that Lahuma is strongly, Lahuma actually is, one of his motto in life is actually that mati hidup dan susah senang dipegang oleh Allah Azza wa Jalla, which means that he has the ultimate faith in God, that God will help him to go through the difficulties in life, which is why I have included this short snippet video for you to actually see or get a sense of his strong faith in his religion.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi. Astagfirullahaladzim. Ya Allah, ya Rasulullah, ya Allah. Ampunkanlah segala dosa kami, ya Allah, ya Allah. Jauhkanlah kami dari segala malapetaka, ya Allah. Kuatkanlah iman kami, usaha kami, kerja dan ibadah kami, ya Allah.
Okay, so that is for the context of the book. Now let's move on to the relevance of the novel to the society. So when talking about the book itself, we can't ignore the literary devices that Shanur Ahmad has portrayed and used in the book. So for example, when talking about morals, this is a timeless novel definitely that serves as a cautionary tale and emphasizes the importance of empathy and understanding in the face of hardship. Shanur Ahmad also reflected their societal roles and encouraged a deeper connection with cultural roots. For the significance of the novel, the title itself serves as a metaphor to show the struggles faced by the characters. is in seeking fulfillment against adversity, encapsulating the essence of human predicament itself. For the symbolism, for example, the rice field is not just sustenance, but it's also a symbol of suffering, which is an irony in itself. For Ranjau, it's actually a painful or inescapable obstacles, and the pain and illnesses that the family faced is actually the cause of poverty. So, and also Shah Nur Ahmad uses imagery, which is the vivid description and effective storytelling that allows reader to delve themselves into feeling uncomfortable. So on the universal themes of insights, this text captures the human experiences and emotions like grief, hope, and resilience, particularly to reflect the systemic oppression and fight against socio-economic barriers that are relevant, not just in Malay culture, but across all cultures in that time frame. For example, and I quote, "Cicit-cicit kita akan meminta sedekah. Cicit-cicit kita akan meminta sedekah. Sungguhnya seorang diri." This is a direct translation, means that, as a direct translation, Lahuma wants to say that his grandchildren will become beggars. His grandchildren will become beggars. It is a worry that for him, because he has to pass on his field to his daughters, and there's no sons. So there's a lot of worries. Yeah. Okay, and last, in hopes of resilience and adversity. For resilience, this story demonstrates a sense of enduring challenges that can empower individuals, fostering a sense of purpose and strength, that even though they live in such circumstances, they can lead a dignified life. And it is to show that the ability to endure in face of adversity that epitomizes human spirit. For relevance in the modern context, this is definitely a timeless novel that will continue to stay relevant, and it offers a critical view of social dynamics in Malay world. But above all, it's not just about plight, it's about powerful relative of hope and empathy. Now, I like to end by saying that in a world where we can face our own thorns, Shah Nur Ahmad's work speaks universally. His characters doesn't have grand ambitions. They just simply strive to live. And perhaps in reflecting on their journey, we can find inspiration to persist in our own, despite the thorns we encounter. So I like to end by an impression of Ranjau Sepanjang Jalan by an artist, his name is Wong Ki Chong, by collection of National Gallery Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you, Muazzah. Maybe you can bring over the mic with you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for sharing on Ranjau Sepanjang Jalan. Okay, I have a question for you. Okay, talking about struggles and resilience in this work. So how has the research on this novel impacted you?
Okay, so this novel is actually a very hard novel to find in a physical copy, so I had to find it in the Lee Kuan Yew Library. Mm-hmm. So I've heard of this novel many times as a literature student, but because of this presentation, I actually had to do research and everything. I realized that it's a very heavy book that I can't sleep that makes me can't sleep at night, because I was crying and reading the book. Mm-hmm. And I realized that actually the strength, if I were to compare myself or put myself in their situation, I can't imagine being that strong and having that level of faith, that level of conviction to continue in life, you know. Mm. So I guess the strength itself is a lot of reflection, self-reflection from this novel.
Do you have to like cross-refer to other novels?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had to do a lot of research, and I realized that it's interesting to read his Shah Nur Ahmad's literary work, like his technique, because it's a very simple book, simple language, but the core essence itself, the readers are able to connect very well. But that's just my opinion.
Something relatable.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so next we would like to have Nur Hikmah Ali to present on Bumi Manusia, This Earth of Mankind by Pramodia Anantatur, an Indonesian author. Set during the Dutch colonial era in Indonesia, Bumi Manusia confronts issues of class, race, and the fight for independence, all through the lens of personal struggles and aspiration. Hikmah is a writer and a poet. She has published poems, commentaries, and essays on several platforms, including Berita Media Corp and Malay Heritage Foundation. Let's welcome Hikmah.
Thank you so much, Anis. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hikmah, and I want to thank you for choosing to spend your Sunday with us today. And thank you to the Singapore Writers Festival and the Malay Heritage Centre for having me. It's really an honor to be speaking in front of you all today. So from Kedah, we will be traveling to Indonesia this time, and still in the past, during the Dutch colonial era, in fact. So we're traveling to Indonesia and way back to the past. I will be speaking about the seminal text of the great Indonesian writer Pramodia Anantatur, who needs no introduction. But if you need an introduction, he is considered to be the father of modern Indonesian literature. His works closely feature strong anti-colonial themes and the emancipation of people against all injustices. And the text is Bumi Manusia, or in English, This Earth of Mankind. So I was introduced to this profound work during my undergraduate years at the NUS Malay Studies Department. And it was also during my university years that I encountered many different views on the theme of the book, which is colonialism itself, specifically Dutch colonialism of what we know today as Indonesia. And among these views, one of them has stuck with me for a very long time. And like what Monza said, it has kept me up for so many nights, because I think about it all the time, simply because it really pissed me off. Okay? One of my professors, just a disclaimer, that professor is not in the picture, so it's not them. Yeah, one of them said in class that colonialism has its benefits because it brought advanced modes of transportation, specifically trains. Yeah, so thank you to the colonials for trains. Yeah. Now, if you read about the construction of railways at the time, you will know about the indentured labor and the terrible working conditions, which sometimes resulted in death. So that's why it really, really annoyed me that she had that kind of position. And it made me wonder whether the professor had ever picked up a book about colonialism. But she's not alone though, and I would say that every year we see a manifestation of this grappling with the realities of colonialism one way or another. And just recently was the issue of the erection of colonial statues in Botanic Gardens. And the questions are always the same. Is colonialism good or bad? What about the positive aspects of colonialism, like our economic development? Is it fair to judge today, the past by today's standards? And one thing about these questions that have always bothered me is how they are very black and white. They view colonialism as something that's one-dimensional, as if colonials are all a monolithic block, a monolithic entity with a sole purpose of propping the entire colonial enterprise of exploitation. So I think this is where Bumi Manusia, or This Earth of Mankind, comes in. I think it challenges these narrow perspectives by showing us the 1,000 faces of colonialism, of the diverse profiles that existed during the colonial period itself. And by looking at their own diversity, we can see that what's really highlighted is what colonialism actually is, which is an enterprise of domination and exploitation. And that's what I want to talk about today. So this book is set during the Dutch East Indies colonization of Indonesia around the 1890s. It follows Minke, the son of a Javanese nobility or priai class, who was a student at HBS, which is a higher civic school in the Dutch language. It's a type of secondary school. And he was one of the rare natives who received a European education, or even an education for that matter. So this book is about his experience meeting different characters, and one of them which stood out the most for him was Nyai Ontosoro. So Nyai is a term given to an indigenous mistress of colonial officers, and they are often viewed in a negative light owing to the fact that their relationships are not recognized legally by whether it is by the native standards or colonial standards. And this Nyai, out of her relationship with a Dutch businessman, Herman Mellema, she was actually sold to this Dutch businessman by her own parents in return for higher status and higher pay. And of their relationship, she had 2 children, which are Robert and Anneliese Mellema. And he meets many other characters as well. And I think Pramodia's exploration of these characters will give us an insight into the realities of colonialism that's often missing, perspectives that are often missing in our conversation. The first character, unfortunately I don't have pictures, but there is a movie about this novel. You can watch it on Netflix. The first character I want to introduce is Robert Surhoff, who is Minke's classmate at HBS. He is, I would simply describe as an arrogant prick who thinks himself superior to the natives, including Minke, because he is of mixed blood or Indo-European. But behind his arrogance, there is a clear sense of insecurity, not just in his identity, but also what it means for him in the present and also in the future, in terms of resource allocation. And as we understand, the purpose of colonial racial hierarchy was to cause a division with Europeans at the top, followed by the mixed blood Indos, which is what Robert was. And lastly, the natives. And where you belong on this hierarchy determines your access to resources and power, including legal rights and economic participation. So we see in Robert's character that there is an uncompromising, strict adherence to this hierarchy, which highlights the dominating, exploitative, and racist nature of colonialism. Even if you are mixed, you are not spared from the racism of colonialism. And this is quite a very long text, but I hope you could just glance through it because I'm really catching up to time. And the second character is the liberals among the Europeans who lived in the Dutch colony at the time. Specifically, Minke's teacher, Miss Magda Peters, but there are many other characters who were Europeans or of mixed descent in Pram's book, but they hold on to ideals of equality and egalitarianism and anti-colonialism, and they recognize the harsh realities of colonialism towards the natives. And I think this group is interesting, and specifically here, Miss Magda Peters, who introduces liberal ideas of equality and exposes the exploitation of colonialism by introducing the main character to works of actual Dutch writers who oppose the colonial system, such as Max Havelaar, which is a novel by a former Dutch official under the alias Multatuli, which is a Dutch word that expresses grief and pain at witnessing injustice. And this is a group of people that I find interesting because it busts the myth of presentism, that we shouldn't judge people in the past based on today's standards. Because clearly, even in the past, there were people who did not find colonialism and everything that it entailed acceptable by their moral standards. And the final character is the liberated. And by this, I mean a group of people who, in spite of or because of their oppression, have been able to find a source of self-esteem and freedom within themselves. These are self-determined people who define their own worth, free from the judgment and imposition of even the colonial enterprise. Even though they do battle with internalized self-hatred imposed by colonialism, they are able to exercise rational thinking and hold on to just principles. And this is most visible in Minke and Nyai Ontosoro, who are able to define themselves and create the new man. This is a snippet of Minke's encounter with the Nyai, who at first he came with his assumptions, preconceived notions about what a Nyai would be like, but he was very surprised because this Nyai was not only educated, eloquent, but she was also managing the entire business, her entire business that was initially set up by her husband, and who eventually, because of his own personal downfalls and also his own mistakes, he could not manage the business, and so everything was handed over to Nyai. And I think what is fascinating about this character is that it reflects Pramodia's own transcendency and visionary perspective. So in expounding characters like Minke and Nyai Ontosoro, as well as her liberated daughter Anneliese and many other figures throughout the book, Pram shows that he is able to transcend his own circumstances and birth a new universal humanistic vision for the colonizer and the colonized, or in his own words, for this earth of mankind. So, and the medium, which is a novel, also matters greatly, because I think only in fiction, and especially in long-form medium like novels, that the complexities of reality can be truly fleshed out and reveal things that perhaps other literary works don't have the room for. So Bumi Manusia is known for many things, but one thing that really stands out to me is how it challenges our imagination of the realities of colonialism in the past, that behind the benevolent colonizer who supposedly did not do any harm, and under colonialism's seemingly positive outcomes, is an entire system that dominates and dehumanizes not just the colonized, but also the colonizer and everyone in between. And for this, I think, before anyone makes any claims about colonialism, like my professor did, I wish they would just pick up Bumi Manusia and read. Thank you. This is my favorite quote from the entire book.
Okay, maybe Hikmah, I will join you there. Come, I have a question for you. Thank you for your, let's stand in the center. Okay, okay, thank you for your presentation. Okay, before we move on, okay, this novel focuses on class, race, and fight for independence. Okay, as a writer yourself, are there any similar writings or titles or works from the current era that has similar standards from the past writers? If there is, maybe you can share the name of writers or the title of their works.
Wow, I think this is a very loaded question because Pram is, I would say he is a master at his craft. He's not just any typical writer. So I think that there are many writers who also expound the ideals and the values that he shares in his books. I would say in Singapore, one writer that really stands out to me is the late Cikgu Muhammad Latif Muhammad, whose writings are very sharp and critical. I would say they are of the similar, and he also expounds a lot of humanistic values in his own works. But to think of a writer that has the same standing as Pramodia, that's very difficult. He belongs in his own league by himself. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Hikmah. Okay, so now for our final presentation, we turn to Kota Air Mata, a novel set in 1980s to 1990s in Singapore by Muhammad Latif Muhammad, a Singaporean writer. This heart-wrenching novel is truly a relevant work for us to discuss human nature and experiences amidst and industrializing Singapore. I am sure these struggles are still relevant for us today. So our third speaker, Haris, is a final year undergraduate at the National University of Singapore, majoring in Malay Studies and Communications and New Media. Haris has a passion for Malay literature and other critical works, as well as developments in the Southeast Asian region pertaining to issues of religion and inequality. Please welcome Haris Imran.
Thank you, Anis. So first of all, likewise, I'd like to say my appreciation to MHC and to SWI for having me. And like Anis mentioned earlier, we moved from Kedah to the Dutch East Indies. Sorry, am I going the wrong way? And now back to Singapore in the modern times. And the work that I'm presenting here today is that of Muhammad Latif Muhammad, titled Kota Air Mata, which translates to mean the City of Tears. It's a very simple book, very thin. The language itself is also very simple, secondary school level, I would say. So for any of you who might want to find a book, unfortunately, it's very hard to find. The National Library has a copy, but I think it's within the restricted section. But otherwise, I think whatever I'm sharing here would be applicable also to other texts, not just Kota Air Mata. And so, sorry, right. Just for the benefit of those who have not yet encountered this book, I'm just going to give you a brief synopsis of the book. Mainly it tells of Ani, a girl who lives in destitute with her parents, Mak Munah and Pak Ali. She's the youngest of 5 siblings. Unfortunately for her, she lives in what we consider today's standards, we would say a broken family, in which her father is an alcoholic, and Mak Munah, as a mother, has to take on the role of covering for her, taking on odd jobs and so on. And at school also, it's not any better for Ani. She does not receive much support from her teacher in the form of Cikgu Majid, who is very cynical, as we shall see later, towards her. And she can only confide in her good friend Siti. Then she meets Azmi, who we learned to be a rich man, who she thought could be her savior, but apparently, sorry, I should have given a trigger warning for this, distressing themes. He took advantage of her, impregnated her, and then he fled. And eventually, the story ends with Ani taking her own life. Right? It's a very tragic story, but it's not something that it's out of this world for us. I think it's something that we've heard from amongst our friends, and let's say our relatives and so on. And so I think it's not fair for me to talk about the book without talking a bit about the writer. Muhammad Latif Muhammad is a proficient writer, as most of us within the Malay literary scene would have recognized. But for the benefit of those who are not yet familiar with him, he was born in Singapore, 1950s, the period after, so he lived during the period after independence. He started writing off from a very young age. Eventually, he taught in primary school and secondary school before joining the curriculum team for education. But most notably, he was a crucial member of Asas 50, who we know its motto was Seni untuk Masyarakat, which means arts for the community. It's not just arts for art's sake, but arts for the community. And this we see in his work based on this book alone. Most notably also, he gained the title of a poet of protest and an angry young man. And so, before we begin to delve deeper into the work, I think it would be necessary here to introduce a framework that was introduced to us, or let's say given to us by Syed Hussein Alatas, in which he delineates the role of functioning intellectuals, in which he prescribes their role as leadership in the 4 domains of thinking with regards to problems. Firstly, the posing of problems, the definition of problems, the analysis of problems, and 4, the solution of problems. And for this book, I would argue that he stops short at 1, 2, and 3. He does not provide his own solution to the problem. But rather, I think it's necessary to see it as a problem because oftentimes problem diagnosis is not given much attention. Right? So for instance, when you go to the doctor, you have a viral infection, but the doctor prescribes it, or let's say diagnoses it as a bacterial infection, and he prescribes you antibiotics. So that is definitely not going to work. In fact, it's going to make your condition worse. So similarly and likewise, when we look at social issues, I think it's necessary to have a proper diagnosis before we offer our own solutions to these problems. And so when we look at the book itself as a diagnosis of problems, the premium mode of presentation is through narration. It's very straightforward, very easy for you to read, but within this simplicity is also various complexities in that he covers various issues through his words, some of which are listed here, and the list is here is definitely not exhaustive. But that's for the purpose of this presentation, because I only have 10 minutes, I shall only cover the first 3, poverty, rape culture, and suicide. And so another item that we will look at social issues is this dialectic that we have in sociology, in which there is the dialectic of structure and agency. Oftentimes when we look at social issues, we tend to give too much attention to the individual, the agency. For instance, when we look at a drug problem, oftentimes we problematize the drug addict without understanding the circumstances that have led to his addiction. And likewise here, it's necessary to understand that there is 2 contesting forces interacting with one another. The contesting of structure from society as an imposement from the top down, as well as the agency from the bottom up in response to that structure. And again, I use Syed Hussein Alatas' terms here, that to be actogenic, meaning those residing in the individual, as well as the factorogenic, as those outside the individual. And so bearing this in mind, we look at the first issue of poverty. And I understand that there are some non-Malay readers here, which I think I will just, for the benefit of you, I will provide a brief description of what is going on in the text here, which I've quoted from the book. So in the first text, it's actually a conversation between Cikgu Majid and Ani in the classroom, in which Cikgu Majid was criticizing Ani for being unable to pay her school fees on time. And here he says, look, our people meaning to refer to the Malay community, our people are like that. When it comes to their education of their children, the school fees $4 a month cannot afford. But when you want to watch Hindustan films 5 times a month, can. If you want to buy pop CD songs, can. You want to spend on makeup, you want to buy television, all can except your education. And this is what Cikgu Majid says to Ani. And we have to recognize the extreme detriment of this when it comes from a member of the Malay community itself. They kind of internalized racism towards the members of one's own community. And here in the second paragraph, we have Ani's response not entirely directly to Cikgu Majid, but rather she confides in her friend Siti, in which she says, it's not that I do not place much attention or focus on my studies, but it's rather that my condition is so poor, I really cannot afford to pay the school fees because her father is an alcoholic and then her mother also cannot afford to support her in that way. Right, so then we see the idea of agency and structure here, that without recognizing the conditions in which have placed Ani in that position to be unable to pay her school fees, we will never be able to recognize that therein lies the issue, and not in her as a member of the Malay community, as if the Malays do not pay attention to their own education. Next is the issue of, so in this regard, I think it would be quite necessary to quote the work of Lili Zubaida Rahim, in which she criticizes the idea or the perception of meritocratic system in Singapore. The assumption here is that if you're to assume that the meritocracy system in Singapore is fully functional, then it kind of places those who do not succeed as having the fault lying in them. That it's because of them that they are unable to succeed. But in reality, we see here, based on this book alone, that it is not their fault, but it's the structural issues that have sort of, let's say for the case of Ani, her conditions living in poverty have not allowed her to kind of afford good education, which will then enable to her to leave poverty. So it's a never-ending cycle. To the next issue of rape culture. And by rape culture here, I have to clarify, I mean a culture that enables rape, that enables these aggressors to leave, to leave after having done whatever form of violence or aggression. And here the specific aspect of rape culture is that of victim shaming, which has been internalized by Ani herself. In which the first paragraph here we see Ani engaging in monologue. And Ani, throughout the entire book, she engages in monologue oftentimes, but you might see it's quite boring, but actually monologue, I would say, is quite important to understand the perspective of the character herself. And here she says, she thinks to herself, oh dear, my mother has given me so much advice to avoid the wicked man, avoid the buaya, the predator, sexual predator and so on. But how can this happen? How have I landed in this situation? And then she ends off with says, what if my father knows about my relationship with Azmi? And then the second part also, she continues on in the later part of the book, in which she says, oh dear, what is my role in life? Should I go home or should I continue to run away? What about my mother? What if they know about the baby that she has in her womb? And so the idea here is not that, the issue that I think Muhammad Latif Muhammad is trying to point here is an idea of victim shaming that has been internalized by the victim themselves, that they do not see the problem as lying in the aggressor, but rather in the victims, which is highly problematic, especially when we want to tackle the issue of rape, when we want to get victims to step forward to report their aggressors. But if they are still held back by such predispositions within their own mind, then of course this will have various repercussions in enacting real change to tackle the issue of rape. And finally, the larger overall issue that we see here in the novel is that of suicide. In the first paragraph, again, Ani's monologue, and in here she contends with the idea of death. She says here, death is necessary, death is lovely, death is certain, and in which she says that death must be better than the situation that she is currently in. To live in poverty, to live in a broken family, to have been made advantage of by Azmi, and then to have no one for support. Death certainly must be the way out of this. And the last paragraph, I think this was the ending paragraph to the book, which I think is quite impactful. It says here, and I'll provide a live translation, on that day, the people in the in the Lion City were busy reading the newspapers. A girl, aged 16, imagine that, Ani was only 16, aged 16, had fallen from the 14th floor, no note, and the girl was believed to have been a Malay girl because she was wearing a baju kurung. And then he ends off with this phrase, kota Singapura macam biasa, sibuk dalam keindahan dan kemeriahannya. The Lion City is as if per normal, busy in its own beauty, in its own bustlingness, right? And so when we look at suicide again like the examples that I mentioned earlier, the issue of drug, now the issue of suicide, with Ani here as the main victim of the story, oftentimes we problematize the victim without looking at the social circumstances surrounding why they engage in such a tragic act. And for this, I think it would be kind of helpful to look at Emile Durkheim's work, or in English we tend to refer to him as Durkheim, in a work that's originally published in French, Le Suicide Étude de Sociologie, in which he delineates 4 types of suicide: the anomic, the egoistic, the altruistic, and the fatalistic. And just based on the summary that I provided here, I think it should be quite clear that Annie engaged in a fatalistic form of suicide, that she was unable to work within the extreme social regulation in the form of the lack of support and so on, that eventually she engaged in the act. And also here, the blame then, we see a shift of the blame not in the victim of suicide itself, but within the social conditions that have led them to form a tragic act. And so with that, I thank you. I end off with these 2 lines. Sekianlah saja, sedikit pencerahan hamba. Semoga terbuka mata, melihat kota air mata. That is all my humble sharing, and I hope that your eyes and your heart has been opened to look at the city of tears. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Okay, as usual, I have a question for him as well. Okay, going through all those and having multiple works while disseminating Kota Air Mata, how has his writings impacted you?
I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think this writing, it's quite impactful to me in the way I understand the role of writers, and not just Muhammad Latif Muhammad, but also others like him who continue to write about social issues. In that, if I may quote the words of my literature teacher, who happens to be sitting here, he always says in class, and it's ingrained in my mind at this point, he says, tatkala pers dibungkam, sastra mesti ke depan. When the press has been silenced, it is literature that must step forward, that must take on the role of intelligentsia in providing, like I said, diagnosis, and then of course their own solutions to social issues. So I think, to my mind, looking at Muhammad Latif Muhammad and also the works of various other Malay literary writers, and of course not just Malays, but of course throughout every other work, to look at text as diagnosis, and then hopefully when we look at social issues, we also can provide or offer some form of solution to those issues.
Right. Thank you very much, Haris.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope their presentations has provided some insights for you from the novels that they shared. And with that, let's give another round of applause and a big thank you to all our Sahabat Sastra today for sharing their critical reading and insights of these seminal works with us. Through their presentations, we've witnessed how Malay and Indonesian literary texts continue to echo the universal human experience, highlighting our shared emotions, values, and struggles. Before we conclude, MHC would like to extend our deepest appreciation to the Singapore Writers Festival, Malay Heritage Foundation, Asian Civilizations Museum, National Heritage Board, and MCCY. And of course, thank you to all of you for being part of today's exploration into our Malay literature. Before you go, please scan this QR code on screen to share with us your feedback, and please also follow us on our social media platforms at Malay Heritage. There are over 200 events to enjoy at SWF. F&B is also available on the porch where you can get coffee, cocktails, and light bites. We hope you'll continue to support the festival. My name is Anis Kuratu Aini. Thank you and see you again.